These are the front sections of the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Washington Times for Monday, May 19th. The most important thing, actually, that if you just took a look at the paper and if the paper were laying open, each one of them have a non-political story. The front page is traditionally a political medium. Over time, the American press has made more and more space on the front page for non-political stories. The Washington Times, right in the center of its page, even above the fold, has a story on a woman who puts her head in the mouth of a crocodile. The New York Times has a picture of a baseball at San Quentin, and then an article on hackers in the Washington Post. This is something that journalists think now they need to do. They need to appeal beyond the political, and these are three large color pictures in the center of the page. Although the New York Times and the Washington Post are more discreet, they're below the fold, and that's important when you realize that at newsstands and in machines, below the fold doesn't show. Let me talk about the most interesting contrast. Their main story in the middle of the page, with exactly the same picture, although cropped differently, is a story on the problems in establishing civil authority in Iraq. Fundamentally, they give different reasons for why there are problems in post-war Iraq, why things aren't working. The New York Times story focuses on the failure of General Garner and his subordinate bureaucracy. If we turn into the Washington Post, we find no mention, virtually no mention of General Garner's failings at all. The explanation here turns largely on Donald Rumsfeld. Despite the fact that they featured the same story and their editors put it on the front page, the editors used the same photograph by the same person working for the Associated Press. In the end, if you read the story, they have totally different takes on why things are falling apart. One chooses an individual, one chooses basically a bureaucracy. What's interesting here is not this individual story, but just imagine that if over time the New York Times generally ascribed failures to individuals and the Washington Post generally described failures to bureaucracies, one could have a whole different worldview of how things work or don't work. And that's what a historian has to do. You have to tease out the meaning of every story, but you can't take too much in any story because any individual story could in fact be anomalous. Now, to turn to the Washington Times, I don't actually have to pick up the paper. I can see from here they don't cover the story. And if you go through the entire paper, as I did, looking page by page, there's nothing on this. So why is it that the New York Times and the Washington Post have this story and the Washington Times does not? Here, I think a common sense answer would be the following. The looting is extremely embarrassing to the Bush administration, and it violates a basic promise that there would be peace created by the American forces in the brief transition to Iraqi rule. The explanation for this lacuna in the Washington Times could be innocuous. They ran out of space. They thought the story was unimportant, or in fact, they don't want to embarrass the Bush administration, and so they play down this problem. This is for the historian to find out not by reading three newspapers, but by seeing if this pattern endures over weeks and months. That's the difference, actually, in a lot of ways between the historian and the journalist. We have the luxury of looking for months and years